The subject of this week's study is technical communication in the workplace. And one thing this chapter does very well is it tries to contrast for you the difference between technical writing and academic writing, because they are very, very different, especially in the minds of students who have been doing a sort of academic writing for a few years. The primary difference that I think is absolutely necessary to understand is that when you have writing in the workplace, the primary goal of that writing is that it be clear, clean, communicative. It needs to get the job done. Now, the level of that writing depends very much on who you're writing to and for what purpose. Obviously, the more technical your audience is, and the more that technical audience needs to know very specific pieces of information, then the writing, it has to meet that need. So it will be more complex. But often you have, for example, this on page 22 of your book. It's an example of a memo, right? It's got the date to, from subject line, introductory summary, features of free work, and the conclusion. And this is a basic kind of a structure that you can expect to see really in all technical writing. The notion of beginning, middle, and end, introduction, body, and conclusion, it's right here, and that is pretty much the same as what you're accustomed to writing for your college essays. So you have an introductory summary, and it gets right to the point. As you requested, I have examined the FreeWork open source productivity suite software. The subject, right? The productivity software, it's in the first line, and it has to be in the first line. People in business, people doing a job, don't want a great big, introduction that moves us from the beginning of time to now, or what have you, as some student essays unfortunately do. So you get right to the point. On the basis of my observations, I recommend we secure one copy and test it for our office. Okay, so that's the purpose, right? The new productivity software, the person who is writing this memo has been asked to test it and been asked to make a recommendation. Yes, we should use it, or no, it's not going to work for us. And this person is saying we should use it, and here's the body. Features of FreeWork. As we agreed, my quick survey of FreeWork involved reading the user's manual, completing the orientation disc, and reviewing installation options. If you write social science or science papers for college, you will notice that this line, that's your methods section right here, compressed into one beautiful little sentence. This is what I did. That's your methods section, okay? Followed by, here are the 8 features of the package that seem the most relevant to our needs. The package might have 24 features, but we only care about 8, so this writer is going to save everybody time and focus on what is important and communicate that clearly, and notice each thing in just 1 or 2 sentences, because that's all anybody needs to know. It is software, so presumably the people who are going to use it, they're going to go at it actively, right? They're applications oriented, as much technical writing is very, very applications oriented. It's writing that tells us what to do or what we should think about, that focuses us onto our point and gives us the information we want. And then your conclusion. Okay, so this is a very nice example on page 22 of your book. Now, your chapter 1 had some, I think, slightly uncharitable things to say about academic writing. In fact, the focus of it seemed entirely having to do with college papers. And college papers, as you know, they're written by a student for a teacher, and the job that they are supposed to do is prove to the professor that the student has done the assignment and understands the assignment very well and is moving on cognitively with these pieces of information. It's proof of understanding and proof of interest. But real live academics don't write from one person to one person to prove that they know something. For example, this is a piece of academic writing. Fashion's Final Frontier. The Correlation of Gender Roles and Fashion in Star Trek. Yes, I'm giving it away. I am a Trekkie. But here you go. Look at this kind of writing. Since its creation in 1966, Star Trek has been a dominant part of popular culture. And as I think that's supposed to say, oops, we have a typo in academic writing, don't tell anyone, has thus served as the source for many cultural references. Star Trek's creator Gene Roddenberry wanted to realize his vision of a utopia, but at the same time he used the futuristic setting of the show to comment on the present time, on actual social and political circumstances. This means that each series can be regarded as a mirror image of the time in which it was created. The clothing of the characters in the different series is one part of that image. The uniforms in the original Star Trek series show influences of 1960s pop art movement, as well as the miniskirt trend that experienced its peak in that decade. In the course of almost 40 years, however, many things changed. In the 1990s, in Deep Space Nine and Voyager, a unisex uniform replaced the mini dresses, with few exceptions. The colorful shirts gave way to ones that were mostly black. This trend continues into the new century. This essay interprets the evolution of the female officers' uniforms, from feminized dresses to androgynous clothing, over the development of the series as a reflection of the change of gender roles in contemporary American society. Okay, so you can see by this writing, it also gets to the point, but it does start a bit more broadly to give sort of historical context and a little bit of context about the show itself, and then it goes, you know, from general to specific, and it comes down to this point about moving toward a more gender equal society. Okay, that's a piece of academic writing, and as you can tell, it's not written to prove that a student understood a piece of writing. It is written to argue, and academic writing very much does that. It argues. Academics fight. It's true. Okay, so if you like, and this is a piece of, you know, humanities writing. So anyway, that's the way that works. Here's another piece of academic writing, also kind of more or less in my field. It's an old piece. You can kind of tell by the font and everything. Last fall, I had an advanced graduate student, bright, energetic, well-informed, whose papers were almost unreadable. He managed to be pretentious, dull, and disorganized in his paper on Emma, and pretentious, dull, and disorganized on Madame Bovary. On the Golden Bowl, he was all these, and obscure as well. Then one day, toward the end of term, he cornered me after class and said, "You know, I think you were all wrong about Rob Rillet's jealousy today. We didn't have time to discuss it, so I suggested that he write me a note about it. 5 hours later, I found in my faculty box a 4-page polemic, right, argument. Unpretentious, stimulating, organized, convincing. Here was a man who had taught freshman composition, for several years, and who was incapable of committing any of the more obvious errors that we think of as characteristic of bad writing. Yet he could not write a decent sentence, paragraph, or paper until his rhetorical problem was solved, until, that is, he had found a definition of his audience, his argument, and his own proper tone of voice." All right. Now, as you can see, this is also not written as an assignment from a student to a teacher. Wayne Booth was a very, very well-known literary critic of his time, mid-20th century. And he's writing almost conversationally here. This is no doubt the way that he would speak to his fellow faculty and probably even his family. It's not terribly formal. It does have, you know, the word polemic in it, so he's educated. But it's still written to kind of serve a purpose. It begins with a description of the problem, and then it leads to a potential point about a solution, which is to say, those of us who teach English, for example, might want to steer students toward rhetorical issues, to be focused on what they're talking about. Anyway, so this is all that I have to say to you, I suppose, about technical communication in the workplace, and we're going to have an assignment for that. Have a good week.